Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I'm your host, Steve Bisson. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in therapy. I also talk to guests about therapy, their experience with therapy, and how psychology is present in many places in their lives. I also share personal stories. So please join me on this journey about therapy. Hi, and welcome to episode 89 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I am Steve Bisson. If you haven't listened to episode 88 yet, please do so. Go back and listen to Courtney Romanowski, Stephanie Simpson, and Mooney talk about movement therapy with me and kind of educating me on the whole process. It was a great conversation, great banter. I felt that everyone got along. It was awesome. But episode 89 will be with a firefighter this time. We usually do at least one first responder episode per season. The regular guest that we usually have, Jay Ball, who will probably talk about his new job as an adjunct professor, but I'll let him do that. He's also a police officer and Army vet. Katelyn Dehey, who's the lead clinician at Westboro Behavioral Health Care. She's also going to bring up a little bit of that clinic and all the work that she does there. But we also added a firefighter now. His name is Knox. He's a full-time firefighter for 24 years. He's earned degrees in fire science and business marketing. He's a full-time dad to his son and daughter. Huge hockey fan. I think if you go to the YouTube video, you'll see that I'm wearing my Bruins jersey. A long story about that. If you want to write to me, I can tell you what the story was. But hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of the unique challenges for firefighters versus police. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing interview, and here it is. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 89 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. It's also YouTube channel episode 24. So again, Jay and Katelyn are used to it. If Eric, you forgot about it, hey, you're going to be on TV or YouTube anyway. We have always had Jay and Katelyn on. I think it's the, fourth or fifth time at this point. You're like the regulars. And always good to talk about first responders, the treatment, how things are going in that direction. And one of the things that Jay has been adamant about is he wants to know if firefighters sleep all the time or not.
Oh, God, here we go.
Just in case, I brought one, just in case.
I love it. You always got to play into the stereotype.
Got to bring
I
you
eat
food.
donuts.
Well, and I think that all joking aside, I've wanted to have a firefighter on several times, and it's never really worked out for us for XYZ reasons. So I'm very happy to have Knox here. And since you're the new guy, Eric, I'm going to start off with you. And how about you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Let's see. My name is Knox. I've been a firefighter in the Metro Boston area for 24 years. I got a couple of kids, a son and a daughter. I think I like hockey, like golf, fishing, long walks on the beach, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I just.
Who's your favorite hockey team again?
Growing up, it was Phillies, actually, but I'm Boston, so I mean, I grew up here, so it's Boston. Boston, Philly.
Wow. Well, at least we're all on the same page here today. Nice to have you here, Eric. How about, I'm going to do slight introduction because I want to put it out there. Professor Jay Ball, you want to tell people about yourself?
Nothing's much changed. Jay Ball, police officer in the Metro West area for about 20 years. Was in the military before that, and currently an adjunct professor at William James College in Newton in the co-responsive behavioral health program.
Well, congratulations. This happened recently, so congratulations. And why did you do that to yourself? That would be another show in its entirety.
Right? Katelyn's responsible.
Oh, okay. Well,
I had nothing to do with
partner. You're a good partner. You influenced me.
Okay.
It sounds like it's the easiest thing to do to just blame Katelyn for everything.
It is. It's easy.
I used to say that to people that in every job I've ever had, they told me I was the most responsible person because anything went wrong, it was my fault.
That works.
So, Katelyn, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Katelyn Dehey, mental health clinician. I work at Westboro Behavioral Health Care Hospital in the first responder specialized treatment program there. Before that, I did co-response for many years with advocates. That's how I got into first responder mental health.
Right. But I think that you also have done so much more. I mean, working with advocates is just part of it. I mean, this program that you've created, I may or may not have had a few phone calls from people who have been very happy with the program. So just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. It's great to hear. I love it. It's been great. It's growing. Program is growing, which is exciting. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, we'll definitely continue talking about that because I think it's important to people to know that there is a program for that. It's interesting. I've asked pretty much every podcast I've ever had an interview. I ask people, hey, have you been in therapy before? And I'm thinking, I never asked Katelyn or Jay. And obviously, Eric, it's your first time, so I've never asked you. So how about we reverse it since you went last, Katelyn? How about you go first? Have you ever been in therapy?
I have, yeah, a handful of therapists throughout my lifetime. My most recent therapist, I've had her for several years. I still see her, once a month or so. Good. I think it's good things are pretty good for me right now, but I like to check in with her anyways and just talk about the good stuff because she's seen me when I've had tougher times and some depression and anxiety. And so I check in with her just to have that person to vent to. I think everybody should have that. I think everybody should see a therapist at some point in their life. The fact is we all go through stuff. So at some point or another, we all have stuff that we could talk to a therapist about. It's unfortunately not how the general public sees the topic, but it's my personal belief that everybody should have a therapist. So yes, I have been in therapy. I still see a therapist and I'm perfectly proud and okay to let people know that.
Well, you need to talk to your therapist because you came back from Florida to come to this place, and there's a problem right there of judgment. But anyway, none of my business. How about you, Jay? I know you've talked about it before, but I pretty much want to ask the question directly. Have you ever been in therapy?
I get you. Well, I'm going to answer the question like a few good men, Colonel Jessup. Yes. No. Yes. Currently, in the past, I got a good guy from the VA. I think back of, well, first of all, there's in service going on for the MPTC this year, and David Augusta, who ironically he's a retired Lawrence police officer and growing up in Lawrence.
Can I stop you for a second? MBTC? Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, Municipal Police Training Council.
Thank you.
Which is the precursor to Post, and that, like I said, that's another show. But he does a great video this year. He has a thing on 212 degrees preventing officer crisis. One thing he does in front of an academy class before he tells his amazing, horrible yet amazing story on his journey, he said you got to become vulnerable. And the way I look at it is, I always thought that, but I never used the word vulnerable. And I think that there's a lot more credibility if I tell someone, hey, listen, I have a diagnosable mental illness, okay, but I still can keep going. I go to a therapist. And like Katelyn said, sometimes just I use the word maintenance. Some days I don't want to go, but sometimes I go. And the guy that I speak to at the VA, he helps a lot, but some days I sit there and stare at him. He'll tell, kind of like say things to me to trigger it. So not to trigger it, but to talk to me about certain subjects. So yes, I do. And I think it's helpful. He sees things that I don't see. Steve, you've known me the longest, over 20 years. I say certain things and do certain things, and they may be helpful, they may be negative, but he'll see certain things that I'm doing in my life, and he points them right out at me. So, I appreciate it. And we'll get into, I guess, that topic in a little while. A couple other things I got to say, so I'll shut up now.
Well, I'll go back to something that Pat Rice says a lot, and he comes on regularly too. He says, we can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And that's why having a therapist is so brilliant, because the shit I can make up in my head, my therapist takes it like, that shit you made up, it's not even real, Steve. So I love having those. And my opinion of, you said sometimes you don't know and he kind of like triggers you or gets you to talk. I find that all my sessions where I had nothing to talk about are usually one of the best sessions I've ever had. So just my experience.
Yeah.
Anyway. What about you, Eric? Have you been in therapy?
I have. I've been in, I don't know, a little while now. Got a pretty good guy, and it's great because, as you were saying, Jay, when they call you on your stuff, it's good. It is really good. It's important just to check in and just have that neutral party. I mean, we all have friends and stuff, and I know personally, I just sometimes if I'm going through stuff or I'm at work, and I don't know, you can read people. Somebody asks what's going on. I mean, you talk to them and you can tell them stuff, especially if they're good friends. But I don't know, I at times sometimes like you feel like you're dumping a lot of stuff on your friends. And they care, and that's what they're there for. But it's also nice just to have that completely third party that, you know what I mean, that you can just let them just talk, and there'll be no judgment. There'll be nothing. And it's great, especially when they call you on your stuff and you come in and you're quiet, and they kind of get to know you, and they just start poking. It's all good. It's good.
Yeah. Now, I also think that having a therapist is just a way to, friends will validate you no matter what. Your therapist might go, yeah, we don't need to be nice to you. So we kind of like challenge your notions. So I think that's the difference. I tell people I'm a paid friend who doesn't need to put up with your crap. And that comes from pistachio pudding. I can't say his name.
Oh, wow. So, that's a blast from the past.
I thought you'd enjoy that, Jay.
Wow.
No one else will know what we're talking about. We'll tell you off
air.
Nor
do they want to.
No, I don't think they do either, but tell you off air. One of the things that I want to talk about, especially because we finally have a firefighter here, is that there's something about the schedule of a firefighter that's kind of like, I joked around earlier, but all joking aside, it's like, 24 hours on, sometimes 48 on, and then a day off, and then going back in. It's definitely a different schedule. How does that impact someone who is in the fire service, and why is it so challenging for them? And I'll go with you, Eric, since you're the firefighter here. So you're the.
I came from the corporate world. I was in sales beforehand, took this job, and it's kind of, I've been here for 24 years, but it's different. It can be 24 hours can go by like that, or 24 hours can be a very, very long time in the firehouse. Whether you're busy or calls, or the firehouse and your crew and the people you work with are almost like your second family. As we all know, sometimes family is great to have, and other times family can be really, really hard to deal with. And I think sometimes people, they're like, oh, it's a great shift. The shift I currently work is a 24 on, 72 off. Some that work 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 5 days off. And there's really good and bad parts to it. When you're in it, it's great. But when you're trying to relate to the other, like the world in general, it's kind of weird. But just having spouses and having, like I said, there's the rest of the world, your kids, it's when you work in death, are you working? Or it can be tough with it being 24 hours. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I know we were joking around earlier about pillows and taking naps, and everyone seems to, the joke's like, oh, firemen sleep all day. And not that any of my friends or people that know me are going to hear this podcast, they might, and they're probably going to cringe because I tell this story to all the new guys. Like my first day on the fire department, we had 22 runs in 24 hours. I had everything but a building fire. I remember the next morning we're having coffee. I was wired, the lights go on and tones. You're just completely attuned to everything. I mean, the air conditioner would go on. I'd be like, what's that? But I vividly remember they were just like, we have another day like this. You're going to a different station, my friend. But there's some days that are great. Some days are just, they'll call them a no hitter. It happens. Some days that happens. Most of the time it doesn't. We usually go, at my station, we go out the door at least 10, 12 times. So it's hard to, there's just a lot of things of being, it's a completely different culture. You're on all the time. You don't know when the light's going to come on. You don't know what you're going to have. It's so hard for a civilian, I don't want to say civilian, but for somebody who just doesn't know it. They walk, people walk in the fire station, see big trucks and they see gear and everything, all these toys and stuff. It's great. And they might see some people, sitting at the desk or, doing whatever, working out or whatever. And like, oh, this seems like a really cool job. It is. You talk to many firemen, they're like, it's the best job in the world. And I truly believe it is. But with it comes a lot of stuff. There's just stuff. I don't know. Under stuff, there's a lot of bullet points. So,
I mean, I'm going to turn to Katelyn a little bit because she's worked with firefighters and maybe those challenges. But one of the things I also want to mention is that you talk about, I don't know how big your crew is when you're on for those 24 hours. Typically, it's at least 4 people. And then imagine if you don't get along with one of them and you got to put up with their crap for the rest of, like, God knows when that team's going to be broken up. I think that there's a challenge there too, especially if you've got a personality clash, but that's just something I've picked up from the work I've done.
I agree 100%. Sometimes, everyone just doesn't get along. Some people are just, whether it be an old guy coming to a station with a bunch of new guys, which sometimes doesn't get along too well, or just with different people personalities, like you're saying. That dynamic can be tough. It's not like a 9 to 5 where it's like, I can hide in my cubicle. You can hide, but sometimes it's kind of hard. It's like being home. You always meet in the kitchen or the bathroom or stuff like that. So
And Katelyn, you because of your program, because of your experience, do you find that that's something like is unique to firefighters in the sense that it's hard to really relate to other services because of that, or do you feel that's something that is normal?
I think it's something that's pretty relatable to other services. People work certain shifts in policing. People have certain groups of people they work with in the military, and yeah, you don't always get along. And I think that that can be challenging. I think the piece about it for the firefighters is that 24-hour piece, right? That makes it a little more complex because you're together for 24 hours versus the cops have 8, maybe 16, but still that's less than 24 hours, right? So there's a little more breakup of the time spent together with the same people. But I do think, like, something that Eric, you said about like relating to the rest of the world. If you've never stepped foot inside a day in the life of a firefighter, you have no idea what that looks like. And so, you're a firefighter, but you also have a life over here, right? So you have all the stuff that you have to deal with at the firehouse, with the people you work with people you serve in the community, but then you have a life like the rest of us with the spouse and children and family, and those things together can be really challenging to navigate and balance from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit of what, Jay has talked about too, with going to parties. Sometimes people don't relate or they want stories. And I don't know if Jay, you want to jump in here, but I know that Eric, you may face that too. And I just wanted to hear your part, but maybe Jay, you can, remind people what happens when go somewhere and you kind of have a different job and people are like, hey, tell me a story.
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to say something, but I want Eric to absolutely, number one, correct me if I'm wrong and that. But on the police side, obviously, we've got no one wants to ask the guy from the investment firm about his portfolio, and no one wants to ask the person that's a manager at grocery store about how much sales they had. They want the story. Everything they see is what they see on TV, and that's not to group everyone together, but from cops and from live PD and all those things. My thing is this, and I've heard it said to firefighters, and this is why I want Eric to correct me if need be. Everyone says, oh, firefighters. Well, they talk about fires. They see fires on TV. They see the movies and everything like that. But what I think people don't truly realize about firefighters is fires are a small part of the job, number one. But number two, they see any medical, any death, anything along those lines, firefighters are going to. And then when you go to these parties, hey, ask a firefighter. Well, they're not going to tell you more than likely about a fire that happened. What's going to stick out in their mind is the baby, is going to be the drowning, is going to be those, because that's the majority of their calls. They're coming to save you. They're coming to provide medical help. Now, I'm going to shut up now because I'm not a firefighter, but that's kind of my spiel on it. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, in my town, you do call 911, you end up getting us, paramedic unit, and a police officer. But it's the truth. That's the majority of our job. It's kind of turned out that way. Fire service is kind of, I don't know, there's a fire prevention division kind of putting, they're doing a great job with, the invention of fire protections and smoke alarms and all that stuff, which has definitely cut back on fires. Some of the police officers I work with, they're like, you guys get so psyched there's a fire, you think it's great. He goes, we don't get all excited to go to a bank robbery. It's not like, oh, we're going to get a bank robbery today. I really hope so. There's going to be
some my goal.
Exactly.
Like that.
But you go by any fire station, it's like, oh, we're going to get a fire today. It's like, it's a thing. I mean, what you get trained to do, you get jazzed up. It's like, I don't know. It's a, and that's another, like, Katelyn, you're talking about like relating to the public. It's like, how do you explain to somebody, we're excited about going to somebody's worst day? Their house is burning down. They're losing everybody. They could be losing loved ones. How do you explain that you're excited about that? Like, people just kind of go, huh? And they don't quite get it. Yeah, but that get back to the whole about, when people ask you questions, it's exactly, what are the worst things you've seen? The crazy stuff, the babies, it's truth. But usually, I mean, I don't know if anyone asks a fire story, there's always crazy stories. And like you said, on TV, you can't see. There's none of this crazy people walk in. I mean, I don't know what are the fire shows. There's one or two guys that watch them once in a while. We turn on. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, you put on, what was the one with De Niro in Chicago there? Oh, it's horrible. I'm a fireman. I should know it. But like, the stuff is brutal. They see these people like walking into this inferno, It's not like that. It's just not like that. Close your eyes. That's what it's like, and feel your way around. The majority of what we see is we get police and fire, and we get called to everybody's worst day. And the one small difference between police and fire, it's like everyone's like, oh, we got to call the police. Oh, something's in trouble. The cops are coming. The cops are coming. But if you call the fire department, some of the fire departments come. They're coming to help. They're almost like the good guys, which isn't really. I don't know. I don't think so. We both show up. We're doing the exact same thing. But
one of the big things, and I look at this, I'm probably putting this out of order. When I was at my other department, small department, I'll say at Milford, I took a liking to doing arson investigations. And for a small town like Milford at the time, I loved doing the red and blue team. I also played for the Milford Fire hockey team. So it was weird. I had this strong bond with the fire department. And I remember growing up in Lawrence, it never affected me, but fires always they scared me because just kind of like you said, it's not so much the fire, it's losing everything. That is the weird thing, losing everything. And I don't think people realize that. I look at firefighters when I used to come, Milford at the time had an inordinate amount of fires. We grabbed some people, for arson stuff. But the first thing I would do and show up, I knew some of these guys would, if they were there, they came and they weren't used to going to calls. They weren't the junior guys. It was a smaller place. And just to look around, is everyone safe? That was the first question I'd ask the deputy fire chief or the fire chief. Is everyone safe? Is everyone good? Yes. Is everyone out? Yes. People don't realize when there is a fire, they enter that building, it's wood. We hear as police officers, 2-story brick structure, 2-story wood structure. Sometimes we'll want to run in and the firefighters will look at us, especially if it's a lieutenant or above, like, whoa, 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 don't,
Yeah.
no. We're going to go in there, but we're going to go in there this way. You're not going to go in there like that. We're going to go in. They can enter that door. Next thing you know, the support beam for the whole house can go behind. In a split second, everything can change. And yes, you can say that about policing. There's things in policing, but think of that. They're going to that fire. When there is a fire, you're going to that fire and they step in that door and the roof collapses. You think of anything that could happen. Wood burns and these guys are going in. Yes, they have the tools to make sure they're safe, but it's a question mark.
And the movie you were looking for is Backdraft.
But thank you. That's right.
Oh,
Yep. Yep. That and the hose bed action. But anyway, but it's true, Jay. It's like, I know that there's been a couple times, I can think of a handful, that sometimes, we'll get there. Police always get there first. It just normally is. I can think of 2 or 3 times where literally we pull up and you guys are like bailing out. Like, are you kidding me? Like, they try to go through the threshold, or they'll literally pulled 1 or 2 people out before. And I know you're trying to help. And sometimes I know there's been we've talked about it later. It's like, don't go in, because all you do is you actually make another, you can become a victim yourself real quick. I mean, the products of combustion today they're literally deadly. Take a couple hits of that stuff, and just between the heat and just the chemical makeup, the smoke and fumes and stuff, it'll kill you. 1 or 2 breaths and good luck. So.
Now, I'm going to turn to Katelyn for a second here, just to ask a little bit about, because of your program, because of your experience. I know I've been to a fire scene, and the work I did as a co-response was way different than going to a co-response of a mental health or substance abuse situation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that it goes the same way in the work that you do, or do you feel they see it differently, or what have you?
Yes, I agree that the work I did as a co-response clinician at a fire scene a couple times was definitely different than the mental health calls, but there to provide the support for people who are watching their lives literally go up in smoke. And in terms of like some of the firefighters I've worked with in my program, it really is about, like you said, Eric, the fires are the ones they love to talk about. They love to go to the fires, right? I think that's an adrenaline junkie personality thing that most first responders I know have. And there's that, but those aren't the things that cause the trauma, right? It's the baby calls and the suicides and the horrific car accidents with brain matter here and body parts there and people dying in your arms. Those are the calls that stick with people, and the people come to my program and say, work is fine, I don't have any problems with my job. But then as they talk about like me and my wife don't get along, or not, like we don't communicate. And well, what's at the root of that? Well, I come home, she wants to talk about how my day is. I don't want to tell her about
Blue baby.
the blue baby and the
Mhm.
guy hanging from the rafters in the basement. And so I just
Cutting him down.
yeah, so I just say fine, and then she gets mad but it all is related to the job, right? Because it's how do you come home and tell your spouse about those things, right? I've said this before, like some part of it is a protective factor, right? Like you don't want to expose the people in your life to this trauma, like secondary trauma, right? By telling them about some of these horrific things. And also you just spent all day 24 hours doing it, so you don't want to come home and talk about it more. Like I was just doing it for 24 hours. I don't need to come home and tell you call by call. But that's hard, and that creates a communication barrier at home. But I hear some of my firefighters recall calls from 24 years ago, and they'll describe that call with detail like it happened yesterday, because they
Mhm.
remember where everything was in the house and the pictures that were on the wall and the smell and the sounds, and they never talked about it before. And now they have this opportunity to sort of unload some of those bigger things that stuck with them over the years. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to finally unload some of that, because it's not part of the culture to talk about those calls after they happen. It's not like you go back to the firehouse and like have a debrief. Typically, I think places are trying to do this more, but like historically, it's not like you guys go back to the firehouse and are like, oh, that was pretty fucked up. Like we should talk about it. That's not what happens. There might be some dark humor, some jokes made, but like, and that's fine. That's a coping mechanism for sure, right? To be able to go to the next call. But the reality is you're firefighters, but you're humans and you have human emotions to things, and you're seeing human tragedy every day. And to not process those feelings, they just build up over time.
It's funny you brought up that one thing about the general junkie. It's the truth.
Are you confessing?
Maybe. No, but I think, a lot of times, I don't know, adrenaline will get you through a lot of stuff. I think Jay would attest to that too. In crazy situations, but I think that almost blinds you too, and it almost helps you hide it. Whether a 24-hour shift, I know like you're talking about dark humor back at the station. On bad stuff, yeah, more and more we're on really bad stuff. You try to get like a critical incident. Was it CERT team set team? What is the name of it? CISM. Yep. Yep.
Scissor.
Yep. They're doing more of that, and the old school, it was just they'd sit around the kitchen table and like talk about it. The older guys, or if it was something really funky, to talk about it, like you said about dark humor. Is that processing it correctly? No. And if you go way back, it was like, they'd meet at the Elks later, you know what I mean, and handle it that way, which is a whole other thing.
What's wrong with self-medicating? Stop.
I was gonna say, isn't it called going to church? Maybe I'm taking the wrong thing.
It's the truth. No. It's funny. I'd gone since we've kind of shifted that way. I'd gone to a firefighter conference, and there was somebody from a certain team. I can't remember the city he was with, but he got up and he started talking. He's like, how do firefighters, handle stress? Crickets, and 300 people in the room. He goes, we drink. And you chuckle. He goes,
yeah,
seriously. He goes, what do we do? He goes, whatever our culture is. He goes, what do we do at a funeral? Drink. Thousands of people drink. He goes, that's what we do. It's what we've always done. Is it right? He goes, that's not the question. He goes, is it the proper, is that healthy? No. But more and more, that is definitely, I'd say not even more and more. It's widely known that that's not the right way to handle stuff.
I'll turn to Jay for maybe another kind of like response, because Katelyn, we're both treaters. We're civilians in many ways. We do have a privileged situation, but nonetheless, we're civilians. I want to turn to Jay because sometimes what I find is that there's like an understanding between fire and police and having those conversations. But do they really talk about their difficulties from one to another? Because there seems to be sometimes a divide there, and that's just my experience.
So I can say at my old job in Milford, smaller job, us in the fire department, like phenomenal relationship. Obviously, I would think that a little bit more than everyone else because I was working hand in hand on those red blue teams doing the fire investigation. When I came to my current job, I think we're big hockey. Our police department and fire department, huge hockey games, huge everything. I think the hockey guys get along real well. A lot of guys grew up together. A lot of guys did that. As for on scene, like any place, I'm sure that maybe some of the firefighters don't like some of our cops, and some of the cops don't like some of our firefighters. I don't know if there's anything behind it. I know when I go to scene sometime, and it's hard for me to distinguish sometimes, especially at 3 in the morning, who the lieutenant is, who the captain is. Next thing I'm talking to one guy thinking that person's in charge, it's the person over there. And I feel like an idiot. But I think we go to scenes and I think we've got it. I don't know. I feel that we get along well in our city with the fire department. I think we work well together. Yes, are there little things, and there actually some of the things that annoy the firefighters annoy me too. Like if there's a fire, don't put a blue and white car in front of the fire hydrant or in front of the scene, because when the big red thing drives through it, I'm gonna go. They've got hoses and they've got axes and they're going to fight said fire. Why are we parked in front of it? Why don't we sit in our cars, block the streets where we think we should, because they're going to have a ladder, they're going to have this. So I think that's some of the things that younger cops need to know, because I think that sometimes builds animosity. Why are the cops sitting here? We've got a fire. Or why are the cops doing this? And I think that's part of what starts that animosity. Yes, are there sometimes we have a motor vehicle accident and there's airbag deployment, and we call when there's airbag deployment. That's just the way it is. Could we get some people sometime that'll look at the officer, especially if they're younger, and go, "What the hell did you call us for? There's no injuries." And I'll hear it. I'm like, "Hey, the kid's supposed to call. If you're mad, get mad at me. I'm the boss on scene. All right." But I think I've had great relationships with the fire department in my previous job, and now it's just those little quirks. Don't park in front of a fire when the big red thing's coming, or just get out of their way. There's some people that if you've got a rapport and you're in a motor vehicle accident, you're trying to stabilize the neck before the fire department gets there. Hey, great. They may appreciate that, but don't take offense when they say, "Hey, get out of the way." And they're not trying to be rude, but all of a sudden, "Oh, I'm the cop." Fine, be that way. But if the firefighters get out of the way, their level of care is 9 times out of 10 higher than our medical level of care. If they tell you to grab something. We're all there doing the same thing. They tell you, hey, go grab the backboard over there. As a sergeant, I've ran and grabbed the backboard. All right. Hey, Jake, you see the firefighters jumping in the ambulance, driving. Well, they're working on someone in the back. All right. Grab their bags. Ask them, hey, where do I put this? Because they're going to leave the bags behind. All right. That builds, I think, rapport between the so we're not just going, "Oh, I'm going back to my station. I'm going back to my parking lot." Help them carry the bag for them. All right. We can all help each other. We're doing the same. We're doing a different job, but the same job. We're helping people.
Exactly.
No, I would suggest people go to the fire police game in your in your city and see where animosity truly exists. But that's just me.
Yeah. It's a great game, I'll tell you. Getting a little too old for it though. There's a lot of young guys.
I enjoy it, but I remember a lot of stuff there. Maybe we should shift gears a little bit. We talked about a couple of things that mental health and, how do we deal with whatever we saw and, drink. I've worked with old school firefighters that told me like, "Oh, you didn't have to go anywhere for a drink. It was in the kitchen." And I know this is no longer the case, as we all know, but I think that it's important to talk about both the mental health challenges that come with that and also the substance abuse challenge, because with all, it's the same thing with fire and police. And sometimes police have access to better drugs. So that's just my experience. But fire turned to drinking a lot. And it's hard to call a colleague onto, "Hey, you have a problem." And then it's the same thing for police, I find, is if you see a colleague that may be having a problem with a substance of some kind, it's hard to call them on it because you don't want to, it's like the brotherhood, for lack of a better word. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'll start with you, Eric, because, the substance use and the mental health in the fire department, I'm not very familiar ultimately outside of the work I do. So I didn't know if you could talk about that.
Substance abuse, I think back in the day, there was more of it. Not that I'm not that aware of much of that anymore. I think, alcohol is probably a big thing in my experience. And the one thing with that is I know that there's some really, really good systems, some really, really good programs that if you need help, they can get you help so fast it's scary. If someone were to come in and said, "I need help," I know of 2 or 3 people. Or if you've talked to them and know they're going through some tough stuff, if they come and say, "I need help," there's programs out there which are amazing for firefighters and other first responders. But as for substance abuse, I mean, I've heard, like the old school firefighters back, there was lots of, yeah, back in the day, there was a lot of stuff going on. But I think that in the 70s, I think that was probably everywhere. I don't know about Jay. Have you heard that too? Like the heyday in the 70s, it was crazy. It was like the Wild West everywhere.
Oh yeah, the stories I used to hear about. Oh, God, I don't want to. Maybe it was no 70s, yeah, 80s. It's at different places. I'm like, there's no way that happened. Oh yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, midnight, 12:01, yeah, by the back of the stage. You'd be like, no,
Yeah.
zero chance. But then the more and more people, stories get better and they get taller as they go along. But yeah, I've heard some stories and I'm just like, wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
No, I remember a firefighter, old school firefighter, telling me that the best time of the year was between Thanksgiving and New Year's because they get a lot of good booze. So, and I would say it was in the 70s. I would even say it was the 80s. So, just to sound like a jerk here, but nonetheless, that's just who I am. One of the things that, coming back to the substance use, like someone wants to help, then that's, something you can do. What about the colleague that is struggling with that, but doesn't need the help or doesn't admit needing the help?
It's definitely, I mean, that I think that the one good thing, I mean, is it tricky? Yeah, it is tricky. It's just, who wants to approach somebody? But at least I know where I work, there's definitely people like if you're not comfortable, you can reach out to maybe somebody in your union, or there's other people that have gone through things like that, where you can like make phone contact, like Jimmy just hasn't been right. I mean, we all kind of know what's going on, blah blah blah. But if we I should say we where I work, we've never had an issue of like people showing up drunk. Do we know maybe it might smell like you could tell they drank the night before, or you just know that you hear stories, or did you hear this? And there are definitely people that will reach out. I mean, there's definite avenues where you can kind of just be like, what's going on? Do you need, tell us, if you need help, it's there. I've reached out to, I mean, I've not reached out, but I know somebody kind of grabbed me one day and was just started talking about his problems. And it wasn't so much substance abuse, but no, it was. Who am I kidding? I know, but I mean, that just came up. He was just having a really good time, and I was psyched that he actually talked to me about it. I think I helped him, a good ear, and point him in the right direction. But it's not something I think in today's fire service, hopefully, it's not frowned upon. I think it's kind of that hesitation, but it's kind of like, behind the scenes, people start talking and somebody will definitely step up and definitely reach out. So.
What if I can ask just one question, because I think it's important, and I don't know how you're a professional firefighter, just and we live in an area where we have a lot of professional firefighters, and that's just the way it is. But there are areas of the country, even parts of the state, New England, that they're wholly not reserved, but on-call firefighters.
Mhm.
How do you reach out, or what would be your advice as a professional full-time firefighter to those guys and girls that actually make a job that's their job, but they're getting called in on a Saturday night, and then they do their call. It could be anything, and then they go back to regular life again. How would you? I don't know how I say this. How would you give those people that aren't full time firefighters,
Mhm.
advice to help themselves?
I think it's just whether you can get help outside, but if you want inside, it's almost like I don't want to say brotherhood because I don't know. That whole word brother, it's not. It's a pet peeve of mine. It's a long story, but I mean, it's a family thing. You got to look out for each other. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Because if you think about it, when you go out the door and your life is kind of in their hands. I mean, if you're going to go into the crazy situations that we don't have fires all the time anymore, or I don't know, there's plenty of situations I can think that what if somebody's having a bad day or an issue or a substance issue or whatever, and they're not on, I don't know if I really want them with me. And it's not that you're like you're judging them or anything, but you need to get them help. I think you should, I don't know, like I said, I mean, if any volunteer or on call there's affiliations everywhere. Today's day and age, there's a lot of services out there. The stigma, it'll be kind of tricky, I got to get help. But in my experience, when you actually, you get past all that baloney, you get past all that stuff. It's like, listen, this is important. This is you. We care about you. You know what I mean? And you look, I don't know if that answered your question. It's just.
No, I just think of, say I worked for, it's not gonna it won't change. I'm just thinking, I work this, but I'm the guy jumping my pickup truck and I'm flying down to the firehouse to either grab an engine, or I'm flying to the scene. It's like, all right, at the end of it, yeah, maybe we recover the equipment, clean the equipment, but it's like, I'm not a full-time firefighter. I'm a volunteer firefighter. And am I just left in the wind after the call? I'm just where you go back to the house,
Yep.
you've got everyone around you, and the next day you may have everyone around you and you talk. Are there the bonds on these volunteer fire departments? Usually it's a mishmash of who shows up.
I would think there is. Yeah, just because, just the way the camaraderie piece of it, just, it's like, it's adrenaline junkies are going to hang out with each other. Do you know what I mean? I unfortunately don't have tons of background. Or even the fire community itself is just like the police. There's resources. You got to dig. They're there. You just have to use them. And that's sometimes just, leading the horse to water. It's like, it's there, but it's like, literally like, come on, we got to go.
I worked in Vermont, and they're mostly all volunteers. And in the town I am at for my business in Holliston, Massachusetts, most of them are volunteers also. And how I've lifted a little bit of that stigma for me is that the great news is that because you're a volunteer, you can go get all the help that you need, because there's not that stigma. Oh, John's not responding because he's out to treatment. No, John's just out because he's a volunteer and he doesn't need to show up every time. So I think that for me, one of the things that I do to lift that stigma is like, good news, you're a volunteer. You can use all the same resources and no one's going to be like privy to that information. So I had that experience up in Vermont. I was in rural Vermont up in the Lamoille County area. So I'm going to keep it as vague as I can here, but there's a few firefighters there that really found like saw the light with that, because they're like, oh, you're right. I can go somewhere. No one's going to know I'm a volunteer. So they're not expecting me to show up at the station. So I think that's how I lifted the stigma in regards to that. And I don't know, Katelyn, how would you do it? Because I, as a fellow treater, I'm sure you face that on a regular basis also.
Yeah, no, I think that's great with the volunteers. Like, absolutely, like they don't have the same expectations, if you will, about being there for your shift or whatever. I think in my experience with firefighters, alcohol is definitely a big one. Cocaine seems to be pretty common. I think that goes back to that adrenaline piece, looking for that, when there's no fires for, maybe a month or so, right? People seek that excitement, that adrenaline. And then gambling has been another thing that I've really seen be kind of common amongst the firefighter population. But I think the stigma for firefighters really, and it's the same with police, really all the first responders, is it kind of comes down to the politics in the station and who's the commanding officer, the commanding captain at the fire station, and whether or not they support the people that work for them. There's this, with a lot of departments, there's this good, yeah, of course we support the guys to get treatment if that's what they need, but whatever. But then returning to work after being on leave, well, we're not sure, maybe they should be terminated. Like, no, like either you support them getting the treatment and accept that you can get treatment and come back after successful treatment and still perform the duties of your job. Either you accept that as a department or you don't, right? Like there's, I think unfortunately it's, a lot of places trying to put on that front, like, yeah, we care about the mental health and we want our people to get the help they need. But then when it comes down to the bottom line, people get a lot of pushback. And I think that's really where the stigma stays strong, is because people don't want to lose their jobs. Been a firefighter for, Eric, you said 24 years. Like if all of a sudden you couldn't work because they they let you go because of your mental health. Like, guys are like, well, what would I do? Like, I've only ever been a firefighter. What would I do?
I was going to say just one thing about that before you go on, Eric. I want you to go. But one of the things I've seen too is that you see in principle, they support that. And I've seen that in police and fire, for the record. And then that person gets, and I said a guy, women too, they go on light duty for a week or two. And then, and then they got to be treated like they're fragile in some way, shape, or form. And then that's another stigma that they put on them. Like, no, I'm fucking back to what I used to do. That's why I got the help. I broke my foot. I got the cast. I'm done. But they don't see that with mental health. And mental health is like, you're fragile. You got to have light duty. You can't do this. You can't do that. So I think that sometimes it's perpetuated by some of the leadership.
Absolutely.
And we talked about that before, Jay, that we need the leadership to be the example. So if you perpetuate it from a leadership standpoint, sometimes that causes even more stigma for people to talk about it.
You read my mind when you said that. I just think the consistency from leadership is important, because sometimes this happened to this person, and this happened. This was different. Or you hear that the next town over, this happened. And whether it be leaders, whether it be your fire chief or the fire commissioners or whatever, and town or city government that you're in, the political piece can be tricky, because everybody. I don't think anyone can say, nobody wants to say, nobody cares about that. Everyone wants to see somebody get better. But what's going to happen after? It's stigma, but then it's that whole, you hit the nail on the head when you said that, all that, just the inconsistencies that I've experienced with higher ups.
Well, and again, I'm going to address another thing that I'll pick on the fire and the police again for a little bit. Besides correction, and if you listen to my January podcast with Brad, I talked about it there too. The whole like hens just pecking at each other. I've never seen it so prevalent more than corrections, police, and fire. Maybe teachers. I'll go with teachers and nurses. Okay, sure. But you guys also like start like, oh, Eric went off for a couple of weeks. What did he go off for? Now it started off with a simple mental health issue. Suddenly Eric was psychotic and wanted to kill someone. And like, what the fuck? And that's because of the pecking stuff. Do you think that also contributes to it? Because that whole like that happens a lot. And if you feel I'm calling out anything and I'm wrong, I'm fine with it. But does that play a factor? I'll look to you and Jay obviously on that one, but not.
No, the way I look at it is this. I always point out a lot of things that are in the 21st century policing doctrine. Transparency. Yes, when someone gets suspended, being a union official a lot of my career, the general population within the department is not going to find out about that. They know so and so's not there, and all of a sudden it's gone from, they got suspended for a day to they're at the farm, they're at the this, they're at the that, and they're making up every single thing about the person. And yes, you can't get out in front of it, but the rumors start. And this person did this, and before 3 days pass by, the story is so tall, there's a beanstalk next to it. And that's the problem. I'm not going to talk about firefighting, but I will speak from experience in policing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The stories are crazy. We have one of my good friends is asked for a reassignment. And it's funny. He's gone in front of every class saying, before the rumors get out, I asked to be reassigned because we got fired, right? Oh my God, the rumors, it's ridiculous. We're like children.
It's a fish this big.
Yeah.
Oh God.
That's so true, Jay. There's a saying in the fire service I was told when I first got on: telephone, telegraph, telefireman. It's brutal. It just starts. It's just the epitome of a rumor mill. It's just, did you hear? Did you hear? Did you hear? And there's always the go-to people if you want to know, and there's always the people that talk, and there's always those. It's brutal. Yeah, and you never get the straight story until if I don't know, if you end up working with a particular person, or if you even care what the story is.
Yes, the way I look at it is, if you care so much or whatnot, find out how that person's doing. Call them.
Exactly.
So and so. Oh, why have they been out 6 weeks? I don't know. Just reach out to him, make sure he's, still alive. No. Well, why are you going to ask me the question? Why don't you see what happened? Why don't we make sure he's not at the bar at the Elks every day because he's drowning it away? He's not the VFW or something like that. Instead of spreading rumors. And I'm sure we're all guilty of it in small ways and large ways. Talking this, that, and the other. I'm sure someone can point out, if I ever run for office, someone's going to point out and say, "Oh, Jay, you did that." Well, yeah, I probably did, like at one time or a small scale, sure. but it's acknowledging that it does happen and making
Really,
the corrections.
like, good point about like reaching out, because I heard a lot of people in my program say the department was so great about getting me into this program. Like, they were super supportive. They like made, they brought me here for my intake, like super supportive. And then some people are in my program for 2 months or so, and they say, I haven't heard from them since then. Like, I got in the program and I've been on leave. I haven't heard from anybody from the department since I got into treatment. And that's discouraging for people, because they certainly are thinking like, oh, there's probably all these stories about me, and that's really disheartening. And having people reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? Checking in throughout that treatment period is really can make a difference.
I remember at one point in my career, I was working with someone who when someone in the department lost their spouse, and everybody was there to give him all the support they wanted for 10 days. After a couple of weeks, he was coming in and like, no one gives a shit, Steve. And I get the sentiment. Of course, people do care, but people don't reach out after a couple of weeks because they've done their duty. And I think that the other thing that I've seen in fire, police, correction, and I'll pick on everyone equally on this one, is like after 2 weeks, suddenly they're supposed to be good. Suddenly everything's going to be great. And I say, don't reach out the first 2 weeks. Give your sympathies, do whatever you need to do. Reach out after 2 weeks. That's going to mean something to someone. And I kind of remind a lot of my servicemen in regards to that. Even in service, when you're talking about the armed forces, I do the same thing, because they'll reach out the first 2 weeks, and then after that, like, Eric's cool. No, Eric's probably still fucked up. No offense, Eric, not you. The other Eric I know.
Just like the other Jay.
But yeah, I think that's what I wanted to kind of like bring that up, because it is happening a lot. And I always say, and then part of it too is because you want to lift the stigma. I also tell my guys, call someone. Like, no one's reached out to you. You don't need to sit there and like, the phone works both ways. You can call them and say, hey, I'm kind of screwed up here. Can you check on me and just like give me a call? It's okay to ask for help, but that doesn't happen often either.
Yeah.
So people rather talk about the one thing we cover in service issue with, preventing officer crisis is one of the things is sick time. Loved old deputy chief long time ago. One of the first ones I had at previous department. Sick time was his big thing. Sick time abuse. Well, if you can find a pattern to say someone's abusing sick time because of their vacation, then also try and find a pattern why someone's taking a random Tuesday off, then the Thursday, but coming in on their Wednesday in the police, in the police service. And maybe if you poke at that or look at that instead of saying it's sick time abuse, you're taking a Sunday day off. Maybe that person's sister watches their mother or father who's elderly, and on those Tuesdays and Thursdays, they've got no one to take care of them. So before, one thing, like I said, sick time abuse, maybe before we push at that, think of what people are going through and look into that. A lot of things I say is, listen, not everyone's going to have stripes, stars, and bars in the police service, but those don't make you a leader. There's informal leaders. For the people that either don't want to make rank or just haven't or whatnot, you're still a leader within your department. Help people out, point things out to your supervisor. Say, hey, so-and-so's struggling. They don't want you involved, but I want to let you know so-and-so's struggling. Okay. Just so your heads up. Because sometimes we forget to get everyone and we miss things. So there's got to be those informal leaders within a police department, and I'm sure within a fire department too.
Yep. No, those are, in the trainings that we've had, informal leadership's just a huge deal. There's kind of like the front of the house and the back of the house. The officers kind of run the show, and then what happens back with them there, it's senior guys usually take that role. And it's a burden, but it's a responsibility to kind of keep stuff squared away, make sure stuff's running right. But yeah, informal leadership is definitely important.
And what I want to point out again is that we filled up an hour and I still have like a few questions that I never got to. And I know that the human ability to pay attention is about an hour. So I try to keep these interviews at an hour. We talked a lot about different things, and I wish we could gotten a little bit more to the cancer rate stuff. And what I'm seeing right now is a shortage of fire and police people going in and working in those departments, and how that's affecting departments. Because, I have more than one firefighter doing 48s now. And that to me is just inhuman for anyone. And when I see like cops do 16 and 24s, again, inhuman, that's just not right. I think that we have a lot more to talk about. So maybe I'll invite you again, Eric, if you wish to come back.
Okay.
And because I would love to talk about that. And I know that, something dear to your heart is talking about the cancer rates in the fire department. We never got around to that and would love to hear that because, there's also some dangers around that firefighters sometimes need to communicate. And I'm sure that there's things in the workforce in the police department that no one really kind of understands that the health risk that comes with that.
I think to have the show that have a show with Eric coming back with the and I'm not sure of his personal feelings on it. I think now him and I are going to be friends and talk, but I think that's huge. Eric alluded to it. Think of the I don't want to say potpourri and make light of it, but think of the potpourri of things that are on fire when they go to a fire. I mean, to me it's unfathomable. I'm not chemicals, everything. It's unspeakable to me.
You can refuse a house in Massachusetts for having lead or having asbestos. The firefighter can't go, there's asbestos and lead in there. I'm not going in. No, it's just fucking have to go in.
Yeah. And it's funny, just like the cancer case, it's also just, I don't know, fire stations are garages. We live in a garage. We live with diesel engines. There's so many little pieces of like where cancer comes from. They're even finding out our gear can give us cancers now. So, but yeah, it's a pretty big prevalent thing, which is important.
So I think I'm going to have you back on, Eric, but I wanted to thank all of you for coming in. Katelyn, I mean, like usually I'd ask what you're going to plug, but Katelyn, how about you talk a little bit of what your program is, because I think it's so important that people know about it.
Thank you. Yeah. So at Westboro Behavioral, we have first responder specialized treatment program. We have partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient hospitalization. So it's sort of intensive crisis stabilization treatment. The partial hospitalization is 5 days a week from 9 to 3, and the intensive outpatient is 3 days a week from 9 to 1, group therapy based. And so far, the people that have been through the program, most of them start out saying, I don't know if group therapy is going to really be my thing. And then having that connection with other first responders is really what makes it valuable. So people typically seem to make good progress and have a good experience in the program. So we're here for first responders, police, fire, EMS, veterans, active military, nurses. We're here for all of it. So if you or somebody needs that kind of help, we're there.
And can I throw another plug in for her, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely.
We did an open house a while back, which I love doing. And can I say I was embarrassed? Yes, embarrassed because the fire department showed up and the police didn't. And this is just kind of my plug out there to police. Don't let the fire department beat us, just like the hockey game. They're showing up. They're caring for their people in all seriousness. All right. They work off shifts just like we do. If you're a leader out there, you've got stars on your shoulder boards, show up when they have these open houses. Call Westboro and Westboro Behavioral Health. Call your local service providers. I said, because I believe in my heart that the firefighters are light years ahead of us. I think it's more accepted, but that's my opinion.
And I tend to agree. And, from the bottom of my heart, Katelyn, I have met people who went to your program and it's exceptional. So I really encourage. I don't gain anything for the record for saying that. It is absolutely just the truth. So I want to make sure you say that. Anything you want to add, Eric? Want to plug or say yay, go IAFF or something?
No, thank you for inviting me. I've watched your show a few different times, Steve. It's interesting. Finally, nice to meet you guys. No, but it's all good. It's all important stuff and just good to talk about. Just like going to therapy. It's just, I don't know. It's good just to talk about and be part of something that's a little innovative. We'll say. How about that?
As I said earlier, me and Katelyn are kind of like civilians in this, but I truly, if this is my part of helping the service, I've done my job. And Jay, benevolent guardian at gmail.com.
Benevolent guardian consulting at gmail.com. Yep. Still, it's funny how I got people coming. Hey, can I teach classes? You need help. So it's slow, but I got a lot of people asking for some mental health stigma classes. We love doing it. Coming out. We're small. We don't really advertise. It's always word of mouth. So thanks for bringing that up.
I will. And I actually was on another podcast where we were talking about fire and police. And I actually talked about your service because it was in a different state. And I'm like, No, it is available. They were like shocked that it was available.
Oh, it's available. I'm a JetBlue Mosaic member. Absolutely.
and that's what I said. I said, you know, he will go anywhere, and that's because
Especially if it's sunny.
I don't know if iOS sunny, but we'll talk about that some other time. All right. Thanks guys.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Well, that concludes episode 89 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. Eric Knox, Katelyn Dehey, and J Ball, thank you. Quite a dynamic conversation. We didn't even get to the questions that I wanted to ask, so we're going to have Eric back sooner rather than later. Episode 90 will be a continuation of my story. I know that people have been curious in regards to that, so I'm going to continue that conversation in the next episode. Please like, subscribe, or follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for information, educational, and entertainment purposes. If you are struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor or therapist for consultation.